For years have passed since the events of the first movie. Nun Irene has settled down in an Italian convent and is trying to forget about all the horrors she had to endure in Romania. But the demon Valak, who at the end of the first movie has taken possession of a Romanian young man named Maurice, is not slumbering. Maurice finds a shelter in a Parisian boarding school for girls, and does not suspect that evil lurks within him. But soon the demonic nun, in whose form Valak comes to our world, will begin his bloody harvest, and the only one who can stop Valak is Irene. First, however, she and her assistant Deborah need to figure out what the demon wants and why it has brought Maurice specifically to France. The nun Dilogy, which grew up as spin-off of the Conjuring movie universe, is asking to be compared to another horror movie series, The Woman in Black. Like The Woman in Black, the first The Nun was quite simple, unoriginal, and in some places completely silly, but technically quite effective horror attraction, which was built on a thick atmosphere and effective screamers. The sequel to Women in Black changed the scenery and gave the main characters a bunch of faceless children, whom they had to protect from the forces of evil. Exactly the same thing happens in The Nun 2, and although formally in the center of events familiar characters, the movie seems not so much a full-fledged sequel as an illegitimate clone of those who are trying to attach themselves to a successful brand. The fact that the creators of the sequel not only have nothing to add to the first movie, but also to say to their audience, becomes obvious quite quickly. The authors grasp for familiar images as if for a saving straw, but they persistently fail to tie a beautiful bow from the sprawling ends of the plot. Thus, Irene's line is hampered by a new heroine, a black nun Deborah, who persistently draws attention to herself, but in the end turns out to be the most empty and unnecessary character in the movie. In the line of Maurice, the situation is a little more interesting. He makes friendship with a boarding school girl student and falls in love with her mother, who is also a teacher. In this storyline there is an interesting hook that Maurice is the bearer of evil at the same time. But since he doesn't know it himself, there's no hint of drama on screen. The sinister nun from time to time shows up in dark corners and kills random people without any principle or internal logic. The first part of The Nun was directed by Corin Hardy, British director, who endowed the picture with a creepy folk vibe of a scary medieval fairy tale. The sequel was directed by Michael Chaves, a creator not so original, but familiar with the horror universe of The Conjuring. For example, he previously directed The Curse of La Llorona and the third part of The Conjuring itself. In The Nun 2, the author is not visible at all. It is a pure genre formula, an attempt to honestly work off an obviously weak number so that it would not be painfully embarrassing. It turns out to be not embarrassing, but deadly boring, and even predictable screamers don't save it. Except maybe for the scene with the magazine stand, where at least some spark of creative thought breaks through. Otherwise, it's a tired movie, not very interesting even to its own creators, which exists only because a successful franchise should bring money and remind about itself from time to time.